Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Maybo AuYeung. I am with the City of Palo Alto in their Zero Waste group. And Palo Alto is one of the first city in California. Actually, we are the first city in California to have adopted a deconstruction ordinance that target both commercial and residential whole structure removal projects. So the full name of our ordinance is the Deconstruction and Construction Materials Management Ordinance. It's a mouthful, but it gives us the opportunity in the future to expand on not just C&D, but the overall, not just deconstruction, but C&D debris management as well. So I'm going to give you guys an overview of what our ordinance requirements look like. Couple of things before jumping into the details is that prior to this ordinance implementation, back in 2017, we already have to comply with Cal Green Building Code in California to reach 65% diversion for projects that are whole structure demolition or interior non-structural demolition, as well as anything that is $25,000 or greater in value. In Palo Alto, later on in 2017, we actually amended our own uni code to increase that threshold to make sure that projects are reaching 80% diversion. So we have a very good start because of our state building code, as well as our council support. Going into the waste side of things, because that's where I come from, not architect, I'm not a construction, general contractor. I'm learning a lot by talking to people in that industry now. But from the zero waste side of things, we did a waste characterization study back in 2017, and we found that 44% of what Palo Alto is discarding into landfills come from C&D projects. We have a zero waste goal to reach 95% diversion by 2030. It's also part of our sustainability and climate action plan goal. So we've been implementing a lot of waste reduction and upstream initiatives. And that only means that our diversion, which is a percentage-based goal, is going to be so much more difficult to reach, especially when a good chunk of our waste come from C&D debris, and they are very heavy. So we decided that we could start looking more into C&D diversion, and we started with deconstruction. And it's a big change shifting from demolition to deconstruction. So we want to make sure that we put things in phases. We want to make sure that we don't affect too many stakeholders. So we look at different approaches on, what type of project should be included and be required to do deconstruction. And these are some of the things we went over. We also turned to our Planning and Development Services Department to kind of understand the permitting process. And at the end of the day, we decided to go with all complete structure removal. Doesn't matter if they're commercial or residential. And we did not have a project value threshold. We don't have it doesn't matter the age of the building either. That was something that is pretty common for other jurisdictions throughout the United States that started putting out deconstruction requirements, that they look at that, but we decided not to go for that. We are only excluding smaller detached buildings, so garages, storage, and ADU. Oops, I'm sorry. There you go. So our ordinance went into effect January 1st of 2020. So it's a little bit over 2 years ago. Later on, I'm going to share some of our status and our data, but that would be for the 2 full fiscal year from July to June, just to be sharing some more complete data that we have collected. But starting July 1st of 2020, demolition for whole structure removal is no longer allowed, and all the project needs to deconstruct and salvage, as well as perform source separation, so waste debris sorting on site, and they have to make sure all the documentation is still up to, that falls under a compliance. Hauling requirement is something that is also required, but that's more related to, what type of containers and hauler could be removing the debris. But we'll jump into the deconstruction requirements a little more. So for a project to begin, obviously you need to get your permit in application. And as part of the submittals, you need to have a salvage survey submitted, and you cannot get your permit issued without it. This is a survey that a reuse organization will have their staff come on site and do a walkthrough to list out building materials, fixtures, and anything that is of value and have a market to be reused to be listed. And this is actually a requirement even prior to our deconstruction ordinance took place, because we want to make sure that our homeowner or project owner are doing this extra step to evaluate what could be salvaged and what could be recycled. So we can give them the chance to decide, are they still going to go with traditional demo or maybe give deconstruction a try? And at that time, if they chose to do deconstruction, there is a time incentive where your deconstruction permit could be issued prior to the new build plan is all ready to go. So it was a good incentive back then. With our ordinance implementation, that is no longer valid. Everybody needs to do the survey and they need to do deconstruction. So these are some examples of materials that were salvaged at multiple projects. Things need to be prepped to spec, and you can see all these lumber were denailed and placed on pallets. Everything is delivered by the contractor to the reuse organization, just like any other debris that's leaving the house. They're just leaving the house nicer looking and going to a new home. Then after the permit is issued and all the inspections are ready, then comes deconstruction. So I just have a few pictures showing kind of the process. All the drywall got taken out, the exterior stuccos came out, and then the roofing came off. So the idea that we have is that not only are deconstruction happening by hand without heavy machine can come in when the chimney is the only thing standing, but also the source separation, the waste sorting on site is really important. You can see piles of metals, clean wood, we have carpets and paddings, and obviously there will be some mixed D&D, there will be some trash that cannot be recycled, but everything should be sorted into individual loads because that will greatly increase the recyclability of all these materials. Some people argue that, my whole mixed D&D box go to a facility and they sort it really well and reach a really high diversion. But we think that that's not good enough, and we can do so much better if the sorting happens on site. And therefore we made it into a requirement. And for us to know that contractors are adhering to these rules, they need to document it. In Palo Alto, we require projects to track their waste using an online platform called Green Halo, and all the weight tags are uploaded here. It incorporated the recovery rates from the different facilities based on material type, so it can give us a really good breakdown of what are the materials and waste that came out of each of the projects. And you can see here that, we can get down to very detailed material type, and that can only be achieved if the contractors are truly source separating on site. And that's something that we're focusing a lot on this year, starting in July. So here's some numbers for the last 2 years. There was about 118 permits submitted, and 78 got issued, and 73 of them got deconstructed or removed. Most of our projects are residential, and you can see here that concrete made up a really good portion of the waste stream. But if we take that out, salvage actually reached about 16%, and recycled actually would go up to 61%. So something that we want to share. I'm not sure what picture go, but here are some numbers for all 58 projects that happened during the 2-year period that I had mentioned. So I'm gonna mention, I can go over this also. I want to make sure that I have time for our next speaker in Q&A as well. As a municipality, it was very important that we have got council support and resident support to put this ordinance together. We also was able to have multiple meetings with stakeholders group, general contractor, architect, designer. We looped them in the very beginning, let them know that this is something that we want to do. This is the end goal. How can we put this ordinance together and that it will be more achievable, broken down into phases. And since then, we put that ordinance together, and it has been really helpful for us to work with our hauler and facilities that take in most of the C&D debris locally, and we were able to put some outreach and guidelines together on what could be separated together, or sorted together in one load, or things that must be separated. So that was really good. And from our end, we have been hand-holding every single project that came through, all 100 of them. And it's been really helpful because, we put this requirement out, even though some contractor may have been doing deconstruction, the source separation piece is still very new. And so we are making sure that they understand our expectation. We are there to help them and answer questions. So, and for us to make sure compliance are being reviewed, we make sure some of these processes are incorporated into our permitting process, just like the survey I mentioned. If you don't do it, you don't get your permit. Well, you better do it. If you have questions, let's talk it through. So that has been very helpful. And what I've been talking to contractors now, and because they're my primary contact, and mentioning the reasoning behind putting deconstruction policy out, is that we want to make sure things are not going into the landfill the best way we can. The challenge they tell us is that, well, this is how we were told to build the place, it's part of the plan and things like that. So what I really hope from the building industry is to work with architects, or get the idea into to them earlier on, because when they're designing a building, they really need to start thinking about designing for disassembly, because we can work on the downstream right now. It's end of life material, but next month when this house is deconstructed, a new building gonna come in. What's gonna happen in 30, 40 years when we need to maybe take this house down again? If the if the concept of designing for a deconstruction is not put in place now, we are still very behind, and we'll still have to manage the waste that's left over. So that's something that I would like to get more connection with different architecture group, or just any ways you guys can help. It'll be really good. So one last thing, I know that I was just at a conference. I'm still in the conference right now. It's a Build, Reuse, Deconstruction conference. And I learned yesterday that Seattle actually has a deconstruction ordinance either in place or in progress, that they're gonna have some rebate program. I'm not sure about the details, but I encourage you guys to learn more about it, see if there's any connection, and hopefully you already know about it. So just want to give a shout out to Seattle as well, since they are also working on putting policy together. But that's all I have today. If you have any questions, make sure to email me at deconstruction@cityofpaloalto.org, and we can talk more towards the end of this meeting too. Thank you.